let me start. Alright, so I just came down. They're still upstairs arguing witnesses and who's going to be allowed to testify and who's not. I'm going to go through and do the entire day update. We came back with cross-examination of Special Agent Joel Willis. Marchese got up there and pointed out that Eric doesn't have his 3% of Idaho tattoo at the time of the Bundy Ranch. He states that you had 270 in the wash and only 29 officers. Did you count the officers on the northbound bridge? No, they did not. Were there any officers on the southbound bridge? He can't even answer that, or refuses to answer that. And then he did not count any officers on the southbound bridge. Did you count any officers at Post 1? You're counting all of the protesters in the wash, protesters on both bridges to up that number. But they say only 29 officers. 29 officers down in the wash. That doesn't count the Metro officers. That doesn't count Nevada Highway Patrol. That doesn't count anyone at Post 1, where a lot of the Metro and SWAT and all of those people were. It doesn't count anyone at the ICP either. So what they're trying to do is, once again, they're trying to make this number seem a lot bigger. They also said 400 and something, and they were counting people off of pictures. So they were counting people on a bridge at one time, and then people in the wash at a different time. What if those people at the bridge went down into the wash? What if the people under the wash went up to the bridge? Are those people counted multiple times? Probably so. Then he shows the video of Todd Engel, and he said, Todd Engel spoke of gun battles that were going to pursue the day of everyone arrested. When Eric was arrested, were there any gun battles? No, there wasn't. Then he was asked about the northbound and southbound bridge being at the same angle, and that the terrain hasn't changed in the last 3 years. That there were bushes and trees, erosion of the road. He said, no, this hasn't changed that much in the last couple years. 209 is a picture he took, he said, months ago in March. This is where he puts the broom in there. He was asked about erosion of the asphalt road underneath. I can tell you, I've been down there. I've seen chunks of the asphalt fall down into the stand. Yes, there is erosion every time it rains here. Water goes through that area, and that asphalt is put on top of really soft sand, and it is eroding away amazingly. So for them to say that is ridiculous. Then they asked about the size of the broomstick, which is about 1.5 inch to 2 inches in diameter. And about higher in the crack, you can maneuver better than lower in the crack. Then it was asked, here's a picture, can you see Mr. Parker's weapon protruding on the other end? Obviously, this broom that is much longer than the weapon through the entire crack is going to have more mobility than his weapon that could maybe go in this much to this much before it's hit. So go and look at that picture and tell me how much of that weapon is actually inside that crack, and that if you're barrel is in that crack, if you'll be able to move it around and shoot. Even if you were able to angle it this way, would it not shoot right directly into the concrete, and then you're practically shooting yourself? Then the picture's brought up, the picture of Eric prone, and they guesstimate about how much Eric's eyes are off the ground and then away from the crack being at the end of his weapon. And then the fact that they never took a photo from those angles through the crack. Leventhal gets up. He says, you put yellow boxes with names in these pictures. Do you have any info that Drexler was in communication with any of these people? And he brings up the picture that has Ryan Payne and Dave Bundy with the little boxes. Then the same thing for Engel. Did Drexler communicate with Engel? They brought in the Stuart Rhodes video, Ammon Bundy. Were they Facebook friends? Did they have communications over phone, recordings? No. None of this time. So then he starts showing the picture of the bridge, and he's like, do you know this person with the tan hat? This person that's obviously with media that has a pad of paper and writing down. And he says, well, I was only to focus on the people with guns. And there was an objection to relevance. He continues his line of questioning about other people with long cameras, people that could be confused of having a gun from that distance. Another objection of relevance and argumentative. So basically, they don't want him to be allowed to ask any of those questions. He's only allowed to ask questions about what Scott Drexler, Eric Parker, Stephen Stewart, or Ricky Loveland did. Then he shows a big tree in front of the agents, and behind the tree they're backing up. So they show the truck backing up, they do the screenshot, but all of the agents are behind a big tree. This is the kind of stuff that they're putting on inside. They are trying to hide every picture of these officers. All the evidence is not being allowed in. So they brought that still from 29A and start playing the video. They play the video and it has a little bit of the audio in it, and the government objects. It says they never admitted the audio. So here we have, once again, that they're omitting a little tiny bit of evidence as possible without audio, even though there's audio on there. That was objected to, and he had to move on. He was able to lay down, they talked about the pictures that he took were misleading with the broom, being able to go all the way through. I'm sorry if some people are having trouble with this. You'll have to go back after it's posted. It's always had an issue down here at the courthouse. If I have too much of an issue, I will repost another one later on where I go through it all again. So then we go into the jury questions. Jury question number 120. Why are others with guns not labeled? He said he was focusing this case on the defendants who are in trial that posed a threat to law enforcement. There was immediately an objection and move to strike that. They did strike that comment, but he still was able to say that in front of the jury. If the defense had done something like this, we would have been stipulated to something else and had to give something else to the prosecution. The prosecution has done this time and time again, and they keep getting away with it. Yes, it was stricken from the record. No, the jury still was able to hear it. Based on the cap, how many degrees from side to side could a weapon move? He's saying 20 degrees. Based on, if you put that broom in that gap, you could move it 20 degrees. First off, that's not possible. There's no way it can move 20 degrees side to side. Secondly, once again, the broom is protruding to the other end. So you could have more mobility if the weapon is pointing out the other end. If it's not, your only mobility is going to be right into concrete, and it's going to be an unsafe fire. Okay, so the next question, will the exhibit list be provided to the jury? Yes. Question number 122, I'll get to that later. They refused to ask that. It was too damning of a question, so they weren't going to ask that in front of the jury. Number 124, what was the reason to have the FBI surveilling the area? That's not relevant, so they didn't even ask the question. If the BLM, or these are the questions that they did answer. If the BLM was in charge of the ICP, what point did the FBI get involved? Of course, they don't want to answer this question because we know that they got involved way before the BLM even got involved. They were involved since January, and the BLM and the roundup started in April. Okay, now 125. How much lateral movement, side to side, with the barrel? He's saying, once again, 20 degrees, and that the field of movement could be greater depending on if the barrel of the weapon was smaller than the barrel or the broomstick. He also said he doesn't know how wide the barrel was, even though they presented Eric Parker's weapon as evidence upstairs. So you have the evidence, you pull it out, you're playing around with it, but you say you don't know what the diameter of the barrel is, when it's quite easy to just go get that weapon out of evidence. You had it in the courtroom a couple days ago and measure it. So what they're doing here is diversion tactics, distract. They're trying to make sure, smoke and mirrors, and give the wrong answers. Let me also bring this up. Everyone, before lunch, everyone's like, oh, they read the jury questions in front of the whole group. And they were so excited that they did that, and it was a good thing, right? Well, let me explain why they did that. They did that because Agent Willis is allowed to sit in the courtroom and listen to all those questions. Then he can spend his entire lunch writing misleading answers to those questions so that he gets to hear those questions an hour before he has to even answer them. Oh, yeah, that's a great thing, right? That's exactly why this Agent Willis has been on the stand 2 times in this trial for almost 3 days. They also talked about vertical movement. And he said vertical wouldn't change, even though, yes, vertical would change, being able to point it downward, because nobody cares if you could point it upward from the bridge, but being able to point it downward. Once again, another misdirected answer. Why didn't you take support for the range finding experience? He said he was out there 6+ times, and that he had 1 to 5 people with him when he went, but he didn't have anyone when he went to take the pictures. How convenient. Doesn't this sound like government bureaucracy? They take enough people when they have nothing to do, but when it really counts, they don't take enough people.
Is everybody coming out? It's over.
did you calibrate the rangefinders? He said, well, he didn't even talk about the first rangefinder that he took, and then the second one was brand new, and he asked the store employees and found no reason to calibrate something that was brand new other than to send it back to the manufacturer and have them make sure it's calibrated. Then he was asked if he used GPS. He did not have access to that type of equipment. Oh, really? No access to GPS equipment? That seems like bullshit. I'm sorry that I'm cussing, but it is bullshit. They tell me that they don't have access to GPS equipment when they do have access to all of that kind of stuff. Are the bridges exactly parallel? He says yes. He says yes to that. Can you believe that? Anyone who's been out there knows there's an offset. They brought up Stephen Stewart posted on Facebook that they pushed forward, but they remained stationary on the bridge. He said, yes, that is true, but they were not in the wash and they were not stationary. They ran away and then they came back and brought a backpack with water. Oh my, they went and got a backpack and some water because they'd been in the hot sun for an hour.
Oh no, not backpacks again.
Yeah, so, and then they said, did you observe Ricky Loveland pointing at a weapon at any time? No, so that was good for Ricky. Another question, 410 people in the wash, so how many of them were women? How many were children? How many were media? And how many were armed? He did not count the different groups, but he knows that there were 41 armed. And 26 of them were in the wash and everyone else was on the bridge, and they didn't have a number for militia either. Mr. Willis testified that the upper part of the gap, vertical to the right, it veers to the right in the photos, but did not show that. Is it correct? He muddies this up, so we are all confused about this. Number two, so would one have a wider view at the bottom? He says yes, even though in direct examination he testifies at the very bottom, you have the least visibility as possible. Would the bottom stick would be able to move more freely at the bottom of the gap? Yes, he says once again yes, even though in the pictures he testified there's about this much that is this narrowest part. Okay, so 127. Based on your review, did Scott or Steve have any direct communication with anyone that rallied for or organized a Bundy protest before the date in question? He says he doesn't recall. But Stephen Stewart and Scott Drexler traveled to Nevada with Eric Parker, and that would infer that they all communicated together, even though the question said other than the defendants. And so once again, here he is muddling up the answers so that the jury is confused based on the questions. And he said he ended up going back and forth, and the answer was no. They asked about the times and dates. He couldn't even give exact times and dates and when he went back out there and took pictures of the wash, what times, what dates, what time of day. Oh, of course, that evidence is irrelevant. You know, as government employees, you don't really actually need to get the evidence. You don't need times or dates or anything like that. I would think, you know, working in management and everything you can write down, everything you can mark up is important. Time, date, all of these different measurements. Well, what I think the government has done here is they have erased any type of evidence that goes to prove anything other than the guilt of these guys, and they're just going to show what they want to show. So the government redirect says that there was many times that Ricky Loveland wasn't on film, and that there's times that you cannot account for him, and he talks about that. Marchese gets up and says, so the question to the line of sight, that 20 degree, that's a guess, right? And you talked about the bridges being parallel, yet when you're with your rangefinder, there's 7 feet of difference between the ground of each bridge. You labeled people with gun and said you were focusing, this is Leventhal, you labeled people with guns, said you were focusing on people from this case. Brings back up the picture that has Ryan Payne and Dave Bundy and Ryan Bundy pictured. And the judge and the prosecution says this is misleading. The judge says this is misleading. Leventhal says, if you like a sidebar, I think that it's the other way around, that his answer to that question is misleading, and if we'd like to have a sidebar. The judge wouldn't even allow him that sidebar. They just made him move on from that. He said his response was misleading and not the other people. Then he goes to ask about the media question and about how many armed and how many are militia. Once again, the prosecution says he's being misleading. He says, once again, they're the ones being misleading, and this agent is answering the questions misleadingly. Then there was a question, do you know if any of these photos were enhanced or any of the pictures or videos were enhanced. And he said, no, the FBI never enhanced anything. But he said, are you sure that any of these pictures or videos weren't enhanced or photoshopped before you got them? Because you're pulling pictures off of Facebook, you're pulling pictures off of media sources, you're getting pictures from who knows where. Nobody even knows who actually took those photos. So there is no way for him to say that he knows for sure that those photos weren't enhanced. Tomorrow, they're starting the day at 10 a.m., and the jury won't even be back until 1.
No, they're not coming back at all.
The jury's not coming back at all tomorrow, and I will explain this to you. The defense, the judge tries to get the defense to give their 29A motions before the government has officially wrapped up their case, has officially finalized their case. Now let me explain this to you. A 29A motion. This is the motion where the government has to prove all of these different crimes. And if they fail to prove one of these crimes, the charges should be dropped from here before the defense even goes. That's what a 29A motion is. If they failed to prove the conspiracy charges should drop here. By the judge trying to get the the defense to give their 29A motions today before the government has finalized their case, that leaves the door open for the government to go home tonight, get any evidence that they want to continue these charges. So here again, the judge is showing her bias and working as a prosecutor. She is saying, give us your 29A, and the defense is like, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to give it to you until the government says they have finalized their case, and then we'll give you our 29A. We are not going to leave this open for you. So then we go right into the witnesses. We have Patricia Kent that's supposed to be testifying tomorrow. They talk about what her testimony is going to be, and then the judge decides that she's not going to be allowed to testify. But she can come in and proffer and get it on the record, which is extremely important. So anyone coming to testify for this, that you're feeling that it's not going to make a difference, it really does make a difference for appeals. So please still come. We need you to come. We need it on the record. We need you to come in and proffer, even though the jury will not hear your testimony. By the end of the day, I had to get up and leave. Dennis Michael Lynch is supposed to be second via Skype. I had to leave because they're going to make him proffer as well and not going to let his testimony go in front of the jury. In fact, as everyone comes down, there will be no testimony given in front of the jury as I hear it right now. And let's see if they'll even allow Eric Parker to take the stand. Last time we had three witnesses. And we thought, oh, we got a good defense. Everyone's saying, oh, we're waiting to come show support for the defense, right? Well, guess what? There isn't going to be any. We don't get a defense. Last time we had three witnesses, one of them being Eric Parker. Let's see if they'll even allow Eric Parker on the stand right now. I'm still hopeful that we'll have a hung jury, but what's going to happen now that we get a hung jury? They're going to come back, no jury questions, and
engineer the jury.
Engineer us even worse. They stacked the jury. They prevented our defense. They have done everything in their possible will to make sure that these guys get guilty. And if they don't do it here and there's a hung jury, although with the jury questions today, it sounds like it's really good for Ricky Loveland. It's really good for Steven Stewart. It might even be okay for Scott Drexler. But the jury questions didn't seem so great for Eric Parker. It looks like they've already probably found him guilty of at least one thing. And we know what's going to happen if they find him guilty of even one thing. Even one thing, they're going to send him away for 18 to 20 years, just like Todd Engel. More time than a murderer or a rapist would do. And that's all happening upstairs. This is over. Everyone needs to understand that this is done. We will be back here tomorrow. The jury won't even be here. If you want to come watch the railroading and be a witness to this, be my guest. It would have been great to have some more people. I
think it's important to be here tomorrow, have all of this tomorrow. You never know who's going to drive by tomorrow who's not scheduled to be here. So make sure
I do want to say we had a few new people. We had some people that came all the way from Carson City. That's amazing. Thank you so much. We had another person from Las Vegas. She gets up and starts work at 2 a.m. And then she's had a hard time coming down here, but she decided that she was going to make it a long day for herself and come down here today. And that kind of support is amazing. It really helps to have these people that are in Las Vegas that can make it down here is so important. It is so important, and I hope that more people, I hope people from Camp Liberty will actually come down here and sit in the courtroom with us. Thank you all so much.